Okay, I'm not going to waste time. Rather, I'll be starting the webinar. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me welcome Mr. Kaizar Naseem from Dubai. He's the founder and CEO of tech platform FSG, and he has been working in the industry for over 2.5 decades, helping startups, helping the MSMEs, helping the SMEs, helping multiple number of corporates across the globe, and with another note, we are senator for WBAF, which is World Business Angels Forum, working very closely with the World Organization, helping organizations to grow, getting the growth fund, getting the scale up fund, and so on, so forth. If I go on, most probably I'll take 30 minutes more to introduce Mr. Kasim. Rather, I'll open the floor to him and I'll be controlling the event. Already I can see several country people have joined. So we have got India, we have got Anita from Finland, I've got another lady from Finland, I've got Mr. Chopra, who is a founder and CEO of iLead Group and PS Group, one of the largest real estate builder in the city. And I can see, wow, I can see Abdul from Egypt. I can see, wow, I can see a couple of more guys. Okay, with due note, I can see participants, they are waiting in the waiting room. So sir, over to you. Let us start the webinar, and I think we are good to go. Let me control the event. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks a lot, Arijit, and good morning. I think it is morning everywhere. We're, at least the countries you told me, early morning in some countries, but morning nonetheless. Look, just to give a context, I mean, from what I understand, it's a 20-minute discussion and then perhaps some Q&A. Not perhaps, but surely some Q&A and a lot of Q&A. So the context obviously is, first of all, SMEs, micro and SMEs perhaps, and within the context of what's happening currently globally in terms of the COVID-19 and generally, the depression, the economic slide, the erosion of GDPs, not only in countries but globally. So how does a small business survive in such an environment? So we just focus on that. The other clarification is that obviously there is no magic wand. There are going to be a lot of ifs and buts. This situation is still evolving. And frankly, I don't think anyone really has a full handle on where this is heading to. And a very good example is global institutions. I think those institutions which are supposed to have a finger on the pulse of global economy. And I'm talking about the IMF, I'm talking about the World Bank Group, I'm talking about the United Nations. Even they have been revising their assessments of global economy. And for those of you who have been following it, from $1 trillion of erosion to today, I think it's $10 trillion and still moving. And they always qualified now by saying that this is a moving target and the situation could be actually worse. So this is the scenario we're working in. And the reason I mentioned these global institutions is because all of us working in the SME sphere for the last at least a decade, but it's been the flavor of the decade for at least 20 years, I know. It's slowly and gradually built up into a movement over the last decade. And these are the institutions who have led or given a voice that small businesses are the engines of growth, if you remember that phrase 15 years ago. But this is the segment of the economy which creates jobs and which adds value to GDP, anywhere between 40 to 80% depending on the jurisdiction. And employment also, as we all know, 40% to 90% of employment generation depending on the jurisdiction. And yet, these institutions have not been able to provide a framework, an ecosystem. And I mention this because a lot of what we're going to talk about when we talk about survival depends on the ecosystem. Now, having said that, let's move on to SMEs and MSMEs. So even within that segment, we have several categories. So we have the startups, of course, we have the scale-ups, and then we have the businesses that have been ongoing, the restaurants, the small kiosks, the small manufacturers. So these are running businesses. So all of them are going to be affected very differently. And I think we need to be upfront that a lot of these small businesses, I mean, even in the best of economies, are not going to survive. And we hear of businesses closing in the USA, where they had what, $1 trillion, well, 250 billion for SMEs of relief packages. So a lot of businesses will suffer not because of their inability to do what they're doing, but because of their inability to understand the situation and who it is that they need to go to. So we'll talk about that in a little more detail a little later on. So these are the startups and the scale-ups, those who were in, at a certain level and were now thinking of leveraging perhaps other institutions to scale whatever they were doing. So they're in a bit of a fix as well because of this situation. And even forget these two, even those running businesses, and we've all heard of restaurants, for example, who were there for maybe 5 years or 10 years and doing roaring business, are now shutting up, are now closing. So what's happening? I mean, the fact that small businesses are, and to this day, are recognized to be the engine of growth of economies, any economy globally. Therefore, a lot of governments and central banks stepped in, and they stepped in with the easiest things that governments know how to do, including international organizations, which is throwing money at SMEs, which is the easiest thing to do. And I've now been working over the last 2 or 3 months, 2 months actually, with a lot of SMEs, and I'm sure you've been working with a lot of your partners on trying to clear up this confusion of which part of this relief package am I eligible for. So there's a lot of confusion around this, and I think this is something which needs to be understood. So the first thing which I would advise an SME is to, and if this is an SME which has a banking relationship, so that's another differentiation. There are a lot of SMEs which don't have a banking relationship, but let's go to those which have a banking relationship. So their first port of call should be the bank or the banker or the relationship guy who is looking after them or talking to them. And this is also not understood, so that's why I'm emphasizing that. And the reason for that is because the banker would be better able to explain, because they have all this liquidity given to them. A lot of jurisdictions are passing this through formal financial institutions. We'll talk about fintechs also later on, but they came in later when the banks were not able to cope with it. But banks were given the responsibility to disperse. Banks were given the extra liquidity by lowering the reserve requirements by other central bank mechanisms. So they have the money, but they're no takers because the takers don't know how to do it. So the first port of call for an SME, if you've not already done that, is to talk to your banker and ask them, how can I access the relief package? The second is that in case you do not have, a lot of SMEs do not have banking relationships for different reasons, and we all know those reasons, so we won't delve into them. So for them, they need to know that they've been running the business. So the first thing they should do is try and make an assessment of their cash flow, because at the end of the day, it's the cash flow which matters. So where were they getting their revenues from? What has happened to that revenue stream? So is it someone in the supply chain who owes the money, and because they are in a issue, they are in a problem, they cannot. So need to understand that, and based on that understanding, revise their cash flows. What would that cash flow look like in terms of their costs, in terms of the receivables, how much of them should they expect to get? And based on the scenario of that cash flow, determine which part of these relief packages that are available are they eligible for. Because the relief packages are for giving to employees so that you don't have to lay them off. The relief packages are available for if you've taken a line of credit or a loan. So how do you get a moratorium, 3 months grace period? So you need to negotiate that if you have a loan. If you have receivables from suppliers or from people you've sold your goods to who are not able to pay, so how do you discount those? So what product is available under the relief package? So it would depend on where your revenue stream is coming from and which part is affected. Now, a
Talking on the
lot of
same
this,
context, talking
sorry,
on
go
the
ahead.
same context, yeah, talking on the same context, what do you feel? What are the specific sectors which is going to get a big boom post-COVID? What is your assumption?
Look, I think 4 months into this crisis and 2 months being locked in, almost 2 months on an average for everyone, I think we pretty much know the segments which are growth segments, and we've seen them growing. And the platform you're using right now, I think they went up by 40 or 50% overnight in terms of their share value.
Yep.
So it's these type of businesses. It's obviously e-commerce. I think that's a no-brainer for us. And I think the fact that a lot of businesses and corporations and companies will now prefer work from home to physical presence in the office, at least for a large part of their workforce, will enable the growth of this. And for those of you who have kids or kids who are going to university, e-education. And that's why I don't know if you read my last article. So I've said that all of us have been catapulted into the digital era, even though it was creeping on all of us, but many of us were reluctant to embrace it. Most of all, the banks, the legacy banks, and many of us were scared of embracing it. And yet we've been accelerated into that, and we've not been given a choice. And to our surprise, I think almost all of us have discovered that it was not such a bad thing at all and not a difficult thing to learn. So a lot of technology-based businesses are the businesses poised for growth. And these are the ones which are even today attracting. I think we'll talk about investments and VC and angel investment, but these are the type of businesses which I think are still able to. You've probably read about these Revolut and the other one, I'm forgetting the name. They've just raised millions of dollars. Robinhood, I think, was the other one from VCs because of the opportunities that are being faced. So yes, those are the areas where there are opportunities. So e-commerce, digital finance, digital banking, anything which facilitates a service through a digital platform is something which I think is going to be in the growth segment.
Super, super, super. Yeah,
Okay.
please continue
So
with it. Yeah.
yeah, so just coming back to so the SMEs, I mean, look, a lot of them are going to fall by the wayside, and not because of any reason of their own. I mean, I've read about, and all of you have read about this relief which government has asked landlords, for example, to give to their tenants. And one of the first calls, by the way, I received, and this was through LinkedIn, was a gentleman from Malaysia. I don't know if he's on the call or not, who had a problem because he had a very good business, a running restaurant, which was doing roaring business for a year and a half. And the landlord did not want to give him a grace period. So he did not have ability to pay the land. So he had to the rent. So he had to close down the business immediately. I mean, he didn't have cash for even 2 months of rent in advance. And the landlord was not willing to do it. Although there are relief packages available to landlords also. So I don't know if it's in Malaysia. I had asked the gentleman to go and check. So the landlord may not have been aware of that. So this responsibility of making sure that the SMEs, who we all have been, at least lip syncing, but it's a fact that these are the drivers of economic growth, we're not helping them as much as we should be. And I think this is the biggest gap. So what I think should happen or will happen now in a lot of areas, I mean, including environment and sustainability and all that, so it's a separate subject, but also in the SME segment, is that this lip service will now quickly transform into these ecosystems being more robust in a lot of countries in terms of the ability of small and medium enterprises to leverage the ecosystem and be able to get support in times of need and in normal times also. I mean, in normal times, SMEs are at a disadvantage of being able to, how do they get into a supply chain, for example? Someone needs to coach them. Someone needs to link them to this. How do they get into an export market? So whose responsibility is this? I mean, SMEs are small. And I can give you a very good example of, something I did, well, advocated when I was setting up an SME bank. This is 20 years have gone by, actually. It's a long time. And the example I used to give is, look, if you are, I'm from Pakistan, by the way. I mean, I haven't been there for many years, but this bank I set up was in Pakistan. And if, for those of you who know, the FIFA, the football used in the World Cup is made in Pakistan. And this is in a city called Sialkot, which is the hub of SMEs. And it's also called the export triangle of that country. But and it's several supply, it's not one manufacturer. So there are a lot of women who are involved in stitching, in cutting the leather and stitching it and, putting in the brand. So there's several stages of that football. So each one of these small, and these are small enterprises, all this supply chain, they're happy with what they do because they're earning their daily bread. They're getting, let's say, $10 a day. They're happy with that $10 because they get sent. So it's the responsibility of the government to ensure, because this is the person who has the skill. So the government should make sure that that person is making not one football, but two footballs. So he gets not $10, but 15. But the government gets more foreign exchange in their revenue, and especially countries like Pakistan and other developing countries need forex, right? That's their biggest current account deficit. So that's how the government has to encourage small businesses. The small business guy may not have the incentive. I mean, he's happy with what he's doing, but the government has to have that encouragement that you have the skills to make 5 footballs. Why are you just making one? So we'll give you the resources. So these things, I think, will now start. They're already there, at least in theory. Everyone says we have this ecosystem and we're building this, but I think it's going to be expedited. For this crisis, I think, as SMEs have been doing in the past, they have to improvise, but improvise with some knowledge now, because there's a lot of data being thrown out. There's a lot of information available. They need to get out there and start assimilating this information. Most important is the one that what is available there, which I can access today, even if I don't have a banking relationship, in terms of making sure that my business can continue. May not, the owner may not be able to access anything. So it might well have to close down. So then they need to look at what other plans that they have. Is it that it's better for them to close down and to rethink of some other business? Is it better for them to pivot, like a lot of businesses have done, especially those who are involved in manufacturing, and especially garment manufacturing? So they moved into face masks. A lot of these small farmers in a lot of countries, the supply chain of a big pharmaceutical have small SMEs which are supplying them with different ingredients. Lever Brothers has a lot of these. Nestle has a lot of these supply chains. So a lot of these supply chains can pivot. And I know a lot, and I'm sure you know a lot, who have moved into hand sanitizers because they were manufacturing something which had the alcohol base in it. So these are the other things that SMEs are able to do.
So it's a fast adoption. It's a fast adoption of technology that these people can do, because the
technology, exactly.
Because the top line. Yeah, please.
No, go ahead, please.
I'm saying that the technology adoption from top management to the bottom is really lower than any big corporate, because that takes a lot of time for a corporate to take a decision. There is a large amount of decision making board, but for SMEs or MSMEs, it takes maybe hardly 2 to 3 days to decide and make things forward. That's the advantage.
That's a big advantage. I think that's a very good point. And this exactly is the problem with these big banks, because by the time they are able to disperse the money, they have not taken a decision. I mean, if those of you are following, forget India or Pakistan or Finland or Egypt or Nepal, the SBA in the USA has having a big issue. You know that. The banks are not able to decide who they are able to lend to. Who should they be giving this to? So they're just giving it to who they know they should give it to. And these are the bigger SMEs, but the higher side of the SMEs, who frankly might not even need it. So yes, the ability, the agility to move or to change direction is very important. And you mentioned technology. So I think that's another thing, a lesson learned by SMEs, is that they should also now start thinking of, many have, but a lot have not, of how they can best leverage technology. And the reason why SMEs, because I talk to a lot of SMEs, have not looked at that, is because there's this perception that it costs a lot of money to be able to digitalize your business. You don't have to digitalize your business. You need to leverage technology, leverage platforms which are already there. So look at platforms which can link you, for example, to a supply chain. search them. How do you get onto that? What is it that you need to do? Maybe you need to change the layout of your plant. There have been instances like that. That if you're a manufacturing unit, or let's say garments, or just this football manufacturer, so the way your plant is laid out is not efficient enough. Your productivity is low. So maybe someone will come in and say, look, we think this is better if you have your lathe machine in this position, then you have the stitching unit here. So the layout, it maybe these type of things. SMEs generally, in my experience, have been reluctant to look for advisory services, to source advisory services. Again, the reason is that they have to pay for it, because a lot of advisory services are paid for. And I've spent a lot of time in convincing a lot of SMEs that they need to do it, because you learn a lot. I mean, from exchanging experiences. And in terms of financing, and this again is something which SMEs, no one tells them. It's like a bank ready to lend to SMEs, and he has no clients because SMEs don't know that the bank is ready to lend to them. So you've got to go out and articulate. So SME, there are a lot of these bilateral and multilateral agencies and companies which are providing financial assistance to SMEs for them to buy commercial advisory services and pay for them. This is part of that ecosystem. And I know it's very underutilized because of SMEs not knowing that these are available. So these are the DFIDs and the USIDs, ADBs, and even central banks of countries. They have their own little pool where an SME can engage a consultant or advisor to advise them on how they can link to it. So leveraging technology, I think, is paramount. This is important, and it's not just the ability to send an email like most SMEs are doing already, but it's the ability to get onto a platform to access funding, access supply chains, access export markets. So yeah, I mean, I think those are a few tips that I can think of right now immediately. I mean, like I said, there's no magic wand, so you've got to improvise as you go along. You mentioned, Arijit, angel investors. So, and we are in angel investors. We're on that forum of the world. I think it's time for angel investors. This is the time. This is this is the crisis which at least our generation, and perhaps the generation before us and after us, or the one the millenniums and the Y, have not experienced so far. Uh, in my 40 years of, I thought the 2008 financial crisis was the worst. So this is not a financial crisis. This is not a sector crisis. This is not in a continent, in a country. It's a global crisis, and it's across the board. It's in your health sector. It's in your manufacturing sector. It's in the financial sector. So everyone has a responsibility, everyone who has the ability to chip in and work in the sector. So angel investors, so what I say is that it is time for angel investors to step up and actually become angels.
Yep.
And angels who invest to ensure the sustainability of their investment in the future. So what I'm saying is, until and unless you have a robust small, medium enterprise, entrepreneurship, technology segment going forward, an angel investor has nothing to invest in.
True.
So you should become an angel and invest in the sustainability of angel investment. So that's, I think, would be my message to angel investors, to myself, and to the forum that we work on.
And to be very honest, I know for a fact that you, me, or person like us, as an angel investor, we not only invest money, rather we invest money, our network, our handholding, our expertise, everything. So it's a beautiful message, and thank you for your beautiful speech. So I have already got a couple of questions. So I got another participant from Russia. She is asking. Her name is Olga. She's asking. Um, she's basically near Siberia at the moment, and that's her hometown. So she's saying that what's your suggestion? Because from our point of view, at the moment we are doing a lot. We are doing a lot from home-based working module, like we used to do. We have that kind of situation that we have to work from home 3 months. So nothing new for us at the moment. But yes, uh, we are actually looking forward some kind of answer from your good self. If you can throw some amount of light on how we can improvise our business sectors post COVID-19, from the countries like Russia, where we have maximum snowfall, and we always take care of all those kind of situations where we always work from home, but there is a dearth of payment from the um, clients. There is no dearth of work, but there is a big gap in payment. How to sustain during this COVID time?
Well, first of all, привет, Olga. Добрый день. Я думаю, в Сибири уже после обеда, да? Очень приятно. Но я знаю, у вас тоже сейчас уже есть COVID-19. Okay, I'll turn to English now. So I don't know if I exactly understood the question, but what I understood was that she's already working from home. So the type of business she is involved in is actually a business that she can do from home. It's home-based. So again, depending on what that business is, I mean, if it is e-commerce, for example, if it is sourcing, products and then selling them within Siberia or within the whole of Russia or within the CIS, so I am not sure if that business has been hit that bad. I mean, I know for a fact that if not me, my daughter is always on one of these platforms and ordering stuff. Uh, so she should continue doing that. I think this is for a lot of people. I've heard that a lot of people were already working from home, which was really not thought of. It was thought of that okay, if you're working from home, you're probably working half the time and the productivity is low. But we all know now that there have been studies conducted that you actually improve or increase your productivity. So I think she should continue to do that. And the fact, I mean, again, if I could know what type of business she's involved in, maybe I could give a more focused answer. In terms of what is available, so I also know for a fact that in Russia, the central bank and their small business agency, it's called over there, is providing a lot of assistance as well to small businesses for their growth. And Russia, again, has, I think, 80% of their business sector is formed of small and medium enterprises. Ольга, это отвечает ваш вопрос или нет?
Well, she's actually okay. Mr. Anupam Bed got a question. Anupam, you can unmute. I'll unmute yourself and you can turn on your video and you can ask the question if you wish.
Yeah, so it's a wonderful forum where a lot of countries Arijit has brought together. My question is that there are SMEs, as I see from your deliberation, that SMEs are there all around the world. So what is the forum and where is there any platform where all SMEs can connect, maybe export to each other, maybe learn from each other, connect in some way or the other?
Well, look, I think each country has a platform that I know for sure, and there are also platforms within regions. European Union has one. I think we have Anita here from Finland. She can elaborate on that. So there are platforms, there are associations, and that's a good question from the point of view of being able to leverage the collective voice of SMEs when you're talking to a central bank, when you're talking to a World Bank, when you're talking to the European Union in terms of the ecosystem. Because the voice of 1 or 2 or 10 SMEs is not heard, and associations are able to do that. Having said that, I was once a member of an association which was supposed to be a world. It was called WASME. It was called World Association of SMEs, and it was actually out of New Delhi, and it was spearheaded by SIDBI. So you guys in India would know the Small Industrial Development Bank of India. I don't know if it still exists. I've attended 2 of their meetings. One of them was in New Delhi itself, and one of them was in Gibraltar, and this is early 2000s, and they had collected a lot of SMEs, and this is the time when SMEs were again sort of becoming the flavor of. So there was a voice. I don't know if it still exists, but there is definitely a need for a platform. But in terms of your question, Anupam, about connecting to markets, so these are regional, local platforms which are able to do that, and I'm sure in India there are platforms which do that. It's that the platforms are not proactive in going out and articulating it to the SMEs that come onto our platform. You're a manufacturer of this item. We think we can connect you to the European Union. These are the specifications they need. Are you able to meet those? So, things like that. These have to happen. And look, the reason I said earlier on that the world may have learned from this is because these big companies, which will survive somehow or the other, well, not somehow, but the other, and the other is actually a lot of money will be thrown at them. You heard too big to fail, so they'll be too big to fail. But the disadvantage they'll be at is because they've been supplied by the SMEs, they've been supplied by supply chains. We saw what happened when China closed for a few months and the supply chains dried up. So because of that they want to source, and rightly so, the best, most efficient, and cheapest raw material or supply chain that they can. And this is offered in various parts of the globe. So those supply chains have to stay alive. So these things, the connections will have to work, and this is going to happen.
Super, super. So I've got another question from Mr. Riti. So Riti is asking, Riti Chatterjee, how can SME take care of recurring costs like office rental that is not getting utilized in lockdown and properly sail over to a WFH model? Beautiful question.
Yeah, it's a good question and a dilemma most SMEs are faced with, even in Dubai. Actually, this morning I was reading in the newspaper. The first point of call, obviously, is the landlord. So if you're renting that premise, you need to have a dialogue with the landlord on how you can negotiate, how they can defer your rental payments for the next months. I mean, again, no one knows, is it 1 month, 2 months, or a year or more, but at least for the next 3 months. A lot of companies have succeeded in doing that. Now, this again would depend on what the supply chain of the landlord is. So if the landlord has a mortgage, for example, on this property, which he has rented out to you, obviously, if you don't pay the rent, the landlord is going to miss the mortgage payment. So the landlord needs to talk to the bank. And the bank already has that mandate from the central bank that they should give a moratorium or a 2-3 month grace period. So that will happen. But then what happens to the bank? I mean, is the question. So it's not an easy question to answer. But for the SME, the landlord is the first. The other is, again, if the landlord doesn't agree, then the banks, some of them, I don't know, Riti, if you're in India or wherever, but these banks also have one of the relief packages in most jurisdictions is to give them rental and give them employee salaries. By the way, these are two major, to stall unemployment and make sure the premises are there. So see if you can get a line of credit or a borrowing from the banks to pay your rent for the next 2-3 months. Yeah.
True. Rahul got a question. It's a long question, Rahul. So I have already unmuted you. You can turn on your video if you wish. You can ask direct question to him. Rahul runs a business over here in Calcutta. I know him in person. Rahul, yeah, over to you.
Hello, sir. So I would like to ask, like, to promote the SMEs, we have seen that there was a experiment by Geo where they were trying to create a e-commerce platform in India where all the sourcing was to be done from the local vendors. Like they were starting from mobile retail shops and they were supposed to supply the products to the homes through the retail shops and not through a e-commerce, warehouse where all the retail shop owners will get a revenue stream. But that model did not become public. It was just an experiment. So maybe in this time, if somebody creates that kind of a model, linking all different kind of retail items to where directly the retail owners can sell their inventory in a organized fashion, maybe checking the expiry dates also. Like if a retail shop has something which is going to expire soon, so all the AI will target that particular order to that retail shop. So the entire inventory also gets utilized in an efficient way, and there is least wastage, most utilization, and all the people in the retail chain can get some significant sustainable income. Maybe that can work as a solution. What is your view on this?
Look, all that you've said, I'm very familiar with the Reliance Group's Geo initiative. And I think they've just raised, one of the other companies, well, that's Reliance, I think they've raised a couple of $1 billion just 2-3 days ago, including from the Saudi fund, sovereign fund. And I think this is exactly their model. I mean, so they tested it, if I'm not mistaken, on grocery stores, right, of this e-commerce platform.
Yeah.
But actually, that is the concept that they have. And they've already, from what I understand, I mean, I'm not in the country, I just know about this. they've already onboarded supply chain platforms to be part of the Reliance platform. So I think they're building this already. It's an excellent idea because, a lot of, let's say, just talk about farmers, for example, forget the, at the source. I mean, they're not able to get their produce to the market or even to the warehouses on time because of the pricing, because of the logistics, uh, and stuff like that. These grocery stores are not able to deliver, especially in this time of, this virus. So this is an excellent idea, and I think Jio is coming in with a big way in India. I think, yeah, the other Facebook has invested in them yesterday. Actually, Facebook with the likes of these giants, I think Jio is going to take off for sure.
Yep, that was
So
basically
what
the
is
plan.
important is to keep a significant percentage of local SMEs also in, the products so that they also sustain. If this kind of a model comes in, that the government should ensure that local products are also sold on those markets to ensure the sustainability of the SMEs. That is most important in this
Yeah.
time when we
Completely
are
agree.
discussing about
Completely agree.
SMEs.
If I recall, I think that was it. Because if I recall, there was some protest by local suppliers and local grocery stores when Walmart, started. So I think they've kept that in view. Again, I'm not 100% sure, but local produce is probably going to be a priority, obviously, for Jio. And I
Yeah.
think that was the idea behind it, to promote local supply chains and local production.
True, true. Thank you, audience, for the beautiful question. Thank you, sir. Thank you, my friend. Thank you, Mr. Kaizar. Thank you for all the insights. Thank you for all the, information that we have shared, exchanged. Thank you for attending this webinar, all the country participants, and for your beautiful questions. I'm getting a lot of questions over here, but honestly speaking, I encourage people to put their question on the chat box. I understand a couple of you don't speak English, so I tried my translation to put your questions. But yes, we have a lot of questions. I'll share the same with Mr. Kaizar, and maybe later on we'll have another session. Let me thank you for your time. Thank you, Kaizar, Mr. Kaizar. Thank you so much, and thank you for being so generous and helping us out. Thank you, Ali, for your brilliant comments in the chat box. Thank you, Rudra. Thank you, everybody, and looking forward for making a great ecosystem together. And let me tell you, regarding the SME, there is a body in India who are trying to work very closely with the SMEs and MSMEs. Hopefully we can do something great together with them. And for WBAF, we are always there for help. We are always extend our hands for any growth, for any kind of small and uh, medium level business. With due note, let me close the session as of now. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Arijit, and stay safe. It was a pleasure being on this platform.
Thank you, Anita.